Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We have quite a bit to cover, so I don't want to eat into our time any more than necessary. I think you saw maybe that Ann had posted some information about asking questions. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen where you can type in questions, and we will try to address those at the end of the webinar, or somebody will answer them online. So let me just welcome you on behalf of the LoRa Alliance to this webinar. I think it's pretty obvious that the post-COVID-19 world is going to have a big impact on how workplaces are managed, and that's not only in terms of legal ramifications or legal compliance, but also in terms of employers convincing their employees that the workplace is safe to return to. So I think this is a very timely webinar, and you're going to hear some good LoRa-based IoT solutions from all the panelists that can assist companies in doing so. So just very briefly, let me tell you a little bit about the LoRa Alliance if you're not familiar. LoRa Alliance, it's a nonprofit organization which is dedicated to standardizing and promoting the LoRaWAN protocol. The LoRaWAN protocol is an open specification that is freely downloadable. Anybody can access it and build products to it or build a solution. You don't need any licensing permission or permission from anybody to build the LoRaWAN network. As you can see, the companies that are involved are quite sort of name brands, familiar to everybody. In case you don't know Machine Q, that's part of Comcast. But there's many major carriers involved, and also suppliers of all sorts, comprising the 500 members. The standard has been around for about 5 years, and you can see there's been widespread adoption, and we're continuing to see growth in the ramp every year that goes by. You can move to the next one, Ann. To sort of level set where LoRa fits in the wireless communication space versus other protocols you're probably familiar with. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are familiar to everybody. The advantage of those is that they're very high bandwidth. The disadvantage is that they're very, very short range. Cellular is quite high bandwidth and very good range, but it's not particularly great for battery life in general. And it's generally served by outdoor base stations. LoRa sort of sits dedicated to IoT below that, low bandwidth, but extremely long range and very power efficient. You can go to the next one, Ann. And so the applicability within buildings, I kind of boil it down to these four main points, which is the power consumption I mentioned. If you think about where these IoT devices might be placed, it's going to kill the ROI if you have to go change the batteries. You can deploy a network completely independent of corporate IT infrastructure, or you can work within the corporate IT infrastructure. But this is an important point when we talk about, having to probably quickly deploy systems in buildings and, having to work through maintaining IT security could cause a delay in that. You can build a private network, or you can use a service provided by a public network provider, and there's a very large ecosystem already established. You saw over 500 members in the Alliance. Next slide. So in terms of the high impact use cases, this is what we've seen kind of broadly group them into maintenance and safety, sustainability, and employee productivity. The talks today do overlap with some of these, but primarily we're going to be focusing on the maintenance and safety part, things like predictive cleaning and how to maintain social distancing and how to maintain or determine that your desks have been properly cleaned, things like that. So with that, I'll move on to introducing the panelists. You can read there. Microshare is a service provider providing solutions to office buildings, primarily hospitals, things like that. Nesten is going to talk about some of their contact locating and tracing applications. Then we've got Everynet, myDevices, and Capgemini coming up next. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike Moran to start. And Mike, take it away.
Thank you very much, Byron, and thank you for everybody that is joining from around the world. I've been asked to give a kind of overview and set the stage for my colleagues who will follow with much more specific use cases. From Microshare's standpoint, we take a very holistic view of this. We, almost everything that Byron showed you on the LoRa use case slide there are things that Microshare does. But I'm going to get a little bit macro with you to start. So as this slide says, when history surprises, the consequences can take years to emerge. This is a major surprise. In 1929, of course, the Great Depression started. But over time, it became clear that there was going to be a reordering of US society and governance, that this remade what we think of economics. Economics changed that drastically because of this. And of course, it set the stage for the rise of fascism and Hitler in Europe. In 1949, you see Mao there proclaiming victory and the establishment of the communist state in China. Who knew that this was going to emerge as the kind of linchpin of global manufacturing and globalization in this century? It took years for that to become clear. In 1991, the wall came down. Everyone celebrated the end of the Cold War, well, most people. But what we didn't really get at first is we also added 3 billion people to the global workforce. This was the moment of globalization. And everybody suddenly was competing with many, many, many more people in many more places. In 2001, after those attacks, I was in New York for that. It was terrifying. There was talk of people leaving high density buildings and tall buildings. Security was ramped up all over the world. But the longer term consequences only became clear later. It really destroyed the fabric of the Middle East, the reaction of the United States and its allies. And it basically drained US leadership credibility over the years. It really hurt and changed the world geopolitically. Finally, 2008, of course, this led to the Great Depression, the Great Recession. But if you look in the rearview mirror, it was also kind of the lighting of the fuse for populism. It was the reaction that mattered. The reaction focused on saving big facilities and big banks instead of the average guy, and the average guy was really pissed about that. So we don't always know what history is going to bring. This time, and I think you can go to the next slide, Ann. This time, I think the change will be fast, deep, and lasting. The economic damage is general. It's not confined to a sector or region or particular nation. Pandemics don't obey economic laws, and they don't obey presidential decrees. They burn out when herd immunity or a vaccine is discovered. So we have some serious uncertainty here. The implications go directly to the heart of corporate and landlord duty of care, raising all sorts of ethical and liability issues that do not have precedent. I was speaking to people around the United States yesterday, and almost every state has a different take on whether an employer, for instance, is liable for someone who comes back to work under some form of duress, like if you don't come back, your job is gone, and whether they can then turn and sue the employer. So these are big questions that have not been settled in any jurisdictions. Density itself, and this is really important, is an issue here. At least until COVID is contained, it's not a coincidence, for instance, that my home state, New Jersey, which is the densest state in the United States, leads the United States in per capita deaths and per capita cases of COVID-19. Density is an issue, and we have to deal with that. Corporates, facilities managers, public institutions, REITs will exit this crisis financially weakened. They'll be looking to downsize real estate exposure. And any of them who think they can just get away with, turning up the cleaning frequency of the crews that are in there right now, is sleeping through this crisis. However, and next slide, Ann, there are answers. And at my company, Microshare, we've been saying it for years: clean equals safe. Nothing is new about this concept, but with quite modest investment any building, whether it was built yesterday or during the Black Plague, can be converted from an inert brick and mortar structure to a living, breathing, data producing asset. Next slide. And why is that important? Well, the market largely ignored that message for years. It was considered a nice to have by asset managers, landlords. Now it's a matter of life and death and liability and reputation. At the beginning of this crisis, I did a commercial real estate scenario analysis for Microshare, and we came up with 3 scenarios. You see them here. They may be a little tough to read, so I'll read through. Our main scenario, scenario A, was that the crisis would spawn a major reassessment by large corporate tenants as well as investors. Valuations for commercial real estate were going to plummet, and there would be a spike in delinquencies, fear of density, infection risk, and it would weigh heavily on the office market. I'm not going to go to the other scenarios. The full scenario analysis is there in that URL if you'd like to see it. It's not happy reading. The actual darker scenario is not our main scenario. So it gives you an idea where we are here. But the point of all this is building owners, corporate real estate portfolio managers, you need to do something. This is not just, hey, come back to work. It's time to go back in the water, as the mayor from Jaws would say. Who are they going to trust now? Where are the incentives aligned? This is a really important question. And a lot of the solutions that my colleagues, they're going to more specific solutions that they're going to describe later in this presentation will address some of these issues. Next slide, please. So here's the good news, right? We can fight back. Pandemics are inevitable. Their demise is also inevitable. So the great news here is that the Internet of Things and smart building professionals have been proposing for years solutions to this exact problem. This is not just about contact tracing. I mean, let's face it, if you come out of this, if you own a big building or a facility, and all you've done for your workforce, tenants, customers, is told them that they wear some kind of a badge or download an app so you can trace everything they do, you are missing. You are totally missing. So you need to think holistically. The world has to become a safer place. And the good news here is that all the things you would do to make your facility ready for a post-COVID world, whether it's forced by regulation or ethics or just the desires of your occupants, are the exact same things you would do to, for instance, generate a sustainable place, and in fact, to save money on poorly performing assets, things like energy and wasted water and how you process trash. So next slide, please. What we're hoping here is that we can, use this as a wake-up call. Commercial real estate is notoriously a laggard when it comes to the adoption of technology. We know this very well at Microshare. As I said, we've been saying this for years, and now suddenly we're on the front page of the Financial Times. This is the moment for this revolution in building safety, building performance, building sustainability, and putting wellness of the occupants, whether they're tenants, staff, or customers, front and center. So we've got at Microshare a 6-point approach to this. This is very much the specific COVID moment approach. Obviously, there are other capabilities like air quality monitoring, water usage, temperature and humidity control. You can, monitor decibels and brightness and footfall and refrigerator consistent use, etc. But for COVID-19, for this moment, these are the things that I think lead to the facility that your occupants want to be in. One, you have occupancy monitoring, and this is vital. Knowing how your space is utilized is a prerequisite for understanding the kind of attention any given section of it needs, the ROI it delivers over time. Let's face it, a lot of you who are in the building management or in the portfolio management business are looking to downsize, right? How do you know which rooms are actually being used and are bringing ROI? Predictive cleaning, number 2. we have found that in our predictive cleaning solutions, which involve multiple IoT sensors and going over LoRaWAN gateways in places like washrooms and other common areas, locker rooms, cafeteria areas, this has actually reduced in hospital environments infection rates. This is an enormous thing that already the healthcare industry understood the value of, because antibiotic-resistant bacteria were an issue. Now with viruses, you have the same issue. Viruses are left on things that people touch. How often was that bathroom used? How often was it cleaned? Is anything wrong? Asset zoning, number 3, is about locating equipment, the mobile equipment that can be very expensive, but very, very important to the successful and productive operating of a facility. Universal contact tracing, in fact, our solution there, the thing that was on the front page of the FT recently, that is actually drawn right from asset zoning. That is the personalization, essentially, of asset zoning, to track people in a space where density is impossible to avoid, so that you don't have unknown exposure. And there are good reasons not to do that with smartphones. For instance, the elderly, the poor, precisely the most vulnerable people often don't have smartphones.
Hey, Mike, sorry to interrupt, but we probably need to kind of wrap it up for your portion so we can let the other guys go. Sorry about that.
Need the final slide? Okay, and I'm just going to let you folks read this. I'm sure the slides will be made available after this presentation. But basically, the final thing I'll say is, you're about to see solutions to these problems from people around the world. The most important thing is that this puts people in the center. The building is not the focus at the moment. If your building is your focus, I think you're gonna be seen as out of touch with what has just happened to the planet. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague from Nesten.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, Andrew Beck, CTO at Nesten. The topic is a decentralized proximity tracing with the privacy protection. And throughout the presentation, I'll touch upon each of the words, and so you get an idea of what this means. At a higher level, I think there are 2 key requirements for a system like this. Number 1, privacy preservation. Protecting privacy of employees or tenants is, I think, this a high key requirement. And like many of you, or probably all of you, I spend my time watching, monitoring statistics and watching what medical experts are saying about the current situation. Unfortunately, my personal assessment is this is not going away anytime soon. And so I think what should we do? Let's face the reality head on and do something about it, and then do something that in case of this situation lasts more than 6 months, maybe whenever the vaccine becomes available. So having said that, we don't want to set a precedent that will have a lasting impact on the society. So preserving privacy is something that I think we should really care about, and especially the identity of the person, whoever getting infected, or in the system for contact tracing, and also data management has to be completely transparent. So we don't want to feel like that we are really our private data or locations is being exposed. Number 2, when you have a system like this, it becomes effective only enough a percentage of the population are in the system. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So we'll talk about how to make that happen. And this may actually take some bootstrapping in the early stage, so just get it rolling. and incentivize the deployment so that the people feel like, oh, this is something that there's a benefit for me if I start using this system, and so on. So trying to get the traction rolling in the beginning, and then get people start using it. So this is what we think that we can build a system, and we think this actually been implemented in some, most of it hasn't been implemented, and we think this will actually work. So there are 5 enabling technologies. Number 1, you need some sort of sensing technology to detect the distancing. So accurate distance measurement, we are using what's called UWB, ultra wideband wireless technology. And you need to bring all the data together into sort of whether there's a server or some type of data management. LoRaWAN is a perfect example of how you can bring it all together. And so also there's the BLE. So the ultra wideband is good at doing the highly accurate distance measurement, but you need something that's low power. So the BLE is always on and doing this sort of more of a whether someone is in the coverage range, and also in terms of security, you need to make sure that whatever the data gets securely cryptographically encrypted, and it's not immune to it's not prone to hacking. Data gets stored safely, and our vision is to bring all together with what we've been doing in our ecosystem using a blockchain technology. What this means is maybe some of you are familiar, some are not. Basically, it's a autonomous system that you set it up with the protocols so you agree upon with the participants. And once you set it up, it just keeps on running, right? There's no HR or back office personnel is needed, right? And I think our vision is the way you do it is you basically very open and about the protocol, what you are implementing to the employees, tenants, and tell them exactly how the system works. And you share what we call the Block Explorer and how the data is being collected and then managed. There's nothing really being managed by human. It's all in the chain. So it's anybody can see what's happening. But the truth of the matter is that all the IDs and IDs are encrypted cryptographically. It's almost computationally impossible to just look at the Block Explorer and figure out where who the IDs belong to and so on. We'll get into that in a later slide. So next slide. So in terms of technology, this is what the system looks like using 3 different wireless technologies. So it covers wide coverage and accuracy in terms of a distance measurement, and the low power with the BLE. So just kind of give you a quick synopsis of how the system works is the BLE, it's inherently very low power. It's always monitoring, see if there is someone coming into your sort of a close range within say 10 meters. And if there is, then we kick off this UWB for accurate measurement. So it's doing down to inches. So it's got accuracy of say 3 inches. Not let's say, but it does have down to inches. So you can measure say 9.9, 9.8, 9.5. It's getting closer, closer, closer. And then when it comes to down to very close range, then it's you can implement the buzzer and you can let the user know that look, I think you guys are too close. And we need to bring the data back. And sort of the shortcomings of this UWB and BLE, they're short, they have a short range. So you need something that's can cover the coverage area. That's when LoRaWAN comes in, putting it all together, bring the data back. So if there's something happening in some places in the office, then it can be monitored in the back office. So in fact, we did slightly different operation mode, the 3D indoor positioning at MWC last year at the LA Convention Center. So there's a YouTube video of how this system works. But this social distancing, this proximity tracing is even simpler than what we did because there's no infrastructure. It's just doing peer-to-peer measurement. And then LoRaWAN is doing the backhaul, bring the data. So it's a very straightforward deployment, and we can get this up and running. So next slide. So just wanted to give you some idea about what's happening with the data. Actually, we are currently building app base just to get this rolled out and give some people an idea of how this works. So this is very similar to what the people are doing in the blockchain. There's a cryptographic key generations and then data encryption. So we actually have a proprietary, unique way of generating this public address for these IDs. And that's what gets shared between you and your friend. And just a screenshot here, what it shows is I am sending out the cryptographically generated ID, and it's constantly getting generated. You can set every, say, 2 minutes or 10 minutes. And then the screenshot in particular is just me sitting with my second phone, and they're exchanging this ID. So it looks like I've been sitting with 10 different people, but these are just my randomly generated IDs. And lastly, this is in beta testing, and then we'll be announcing the actual release soon. So you can stay tuned and then look at our website specifically for this. It's called getoffme.io. And personally, if you need to have some type of system, and this, in terms of this, we have a blockchain and then this app and so on, there's no cost to it. I'd like to see it getting implemented. If there's someone in the audience from schools or something, then I'll personally spend my time, make sure that this, you can use this and implement this. So just feel free to let me know. And thanks again for the Byron and Anne for putting together and organizing this webinar.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks. So I believe our next speaker is Hans Schulten from Capgemini, and I'll let Hans tell you what they've done.
Yeah, hi. I'm going to share with you how Capgemini is using LoRaWAN in our offices. We use IoT to facilitate a healthy and safe environment for employees during this COVID period. And this IoT system helps in avoiding unplanned encounters. For instance, at coffee corners, stairs, toilet areas, and other potential busy places in the office. Next slide, please. Due to the 6 feet distance rule, we have to close more than half of our desks. So our office space becomes very scarce. So we want to use the office as a meeting place. That's what we are going to do. And people have to pre-book a day at the office. And also a time slot, because you don't want people to come all at the same time in the office. And in our situation, working from home will be the new normal. And people are allowed to visit the office now and then for social contact and binding. Just working from home is not the solution, not for us. To avoid unplanned encounters, we introduce one-way traffic in the office. And the system we use, this COVID-19, is just a light version of our smart office system. And the smart office system we started to develop 3 years ago, and it's based on LoRaWAN. We developed our own desk sensors, meeting room sensors, and comfort sensors. And we started with the rollout in our 400 offices last year. In total, we will install 140,000 sensors in all our Capgemini buildings. At the start of this development, we defined 2 reasons for implementing this system. The number one was to create a digital experience for employees and make the office a cool place to work in. And the second reason was for our corporate real estate organization. They really wanted accurate usage data of our office space. And that helps in making data-driven decisions at contract renewals. And in our case, it will result, and that's already proven in practice, more than 10% decrease of our yearly real estate budget, which is millions. Now, with adding extra sensors in coffee areas, elevator areas, toilet areas, staircases, restaurants, we create this COVID-19 version, and we make our offices a safer place to work in. The idea is that before an employee starts working in the office, they should look at the floor map on their app and to see if the area where they want to go to is free. And this really avoids unnecessary movement in the office. Next slide, please. Because of our own massive rollout in 400 offices, we made our system very easy to install. Unskilled people with the right instruction can install the complete system. So you don't have to fly in teams of experts. It's plug and play, and the sensors operate on batteries that last for more than 5 years. These sensors are really low cost and high quality. There are several smart office suppliers that are using our sensors today in their solution. And due to the open character of LoRa and the many suppliers of the LoRa ecosystem, there's no vendor lock-in. Every component can be switched or swapped by another component from another supplier. Now, a medium office will be up and running in 4 weeks. If you want any more information about this solution, or you want a demo, please contact me. Yeah, this is it for my presentation. Brian, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Hans. That's, you know, Capgemini is very experienced in this area, and the fact that you've found a way to implement it in your own offices, I think, speaks volumes for the importance of it. So our next speaker is going to be Antonio Terlizzi from Everynet. Everynet is a network operator in several countries around the world, and is building up solutions that they can support behind COVID-19. So, Antonio, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Byron. And since I'm Italian, I'm saying ciao to everyone attending at this webinar. So I will talk about an initiative that we are running in Spain to help the fight against COVID-19. On March 11, when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic, we were totally unprepared, and especially the healthcare system, no matter which was the affected country. And in fact, after several years of budget cuts, the whole health system has been left with limited resources to address public health emergencies. Spain in particular, it was in a terrible situation, second to Italy only, but with a fast increasing number of infected people. The sanitary system was close to collapse, and the Spanish government was building new temporary facilities to support the vacancies of beds in the main hospital buildings. So our top management set up immediately an internal task force. We discussed ways to help and support the hospital sector, that was the most affected one, but with a clear mandate. We should not interfere with doctors and nurses in their daily activity that was much more critical. So you can imagine talking to doctors during those days, professionals that were fighting to find beds, briefing machines for saving lives. It was not an easy task at all. It was not our idea to disturb them from their main activity. In just 2 days, we contacted several partners. We identified 4 major use cases and started spreading the initiatives to all our major partners. So Everynet provided its Spanish LoRaWAN national network for free. We built up network extensions inside hospitals and tents in order to improve indoor coverage. And here, the flexibility of LoRa to deploy instantly a network wherever you need it represented a big plus when compared to all other existing technologies. Anne, please, next slide. So, thanks to 5 strong partners, we were capable to provide such a solution. So they collaborated with us, providing funds, skills, solutions. ABWay Utility, providing the device part. myDevices for the application. Semtech by funding and promoting the initiative. And Redexia by promoting locally the idea and deploying the solution. As a result of such a fruitful synergy, today we have 8 hospitals equipped with this solution. 800 beds have a nurse call button. The patient in difficulties has to press a button to call doctors and nurses, and on a giant screen, the number related to the patient in difficulty is displayed so that the hospital staff can go there, check, and verify what's going on. This service has been provided without utilizing any local private infrastructure from the hospital, so we did not interfere at all with the work of doctors and nurses. And you can imagine in temporary facilities, there was almost no network. So we utilize our existing network with a national coverage, and we densified it with low cost and easy to install additional gateways. This is one of the key advantages of LoRa, where you can combine a national network with an ad hoc coverage extension inside buildings or even in rural areas if you like it. The customer can seamlessly roam from one network to the other one without having any service breakdown. And very few technologies in IoT has such a flexibility. Customers can easily transform any facility into a smart building at a very low cost. And LoRa is also the best solution when it comes to battery life. The nurse call button, for example, is programmed in a way that the device itself can last active up to a week or even more, so that there is basically no interruption of service during day and night. In many other smart building applications, the battery may last for several years. And changing a battery is not only a CapEx issue related to the cost of the battery itself, but also an operational cost, because you need to send technicians to open the device and substitute the battery. Next slide, Danne, please. So what about the future? We are facing a clear acceleration on digitalization. Many companies in the past were postponing investment by focusing in other areas, and now they understood that digital transformation is not an option any longer. So unfortunately, we will coexist with this kind of recurring crisis. And companies cannot be, again, unprepared. So they can resist on the first punch, but On the second one, they will go knocked down. And where people and technology could not make it, the virus could. In fact, COVID-19 is driving innovation today. So from large enterprises to small startups, everybody have been called to action to provide technological solutions for the healthcare system, for solving policy problems, and for providing additional public services. Also, data transparency is becoming key. Governmental institutions, but also local municipalities, they have to provide big data in order to help citizens. For example, in Singapore, they developed an application to track and trace infected people, helping citizens to avoid infected places. Think about air and noise pollution in cities, space occupancy, and many other useful data. So they can help mitigate traffic, improve security, and reduce energy consumption. The other keyword is virtualization. With companies ordered to shut down by authorities to prevent the spread of the virus, workers quickly got used to the new tools such as Zoom, Slack, Hangouts, and they realized that online meetings are as much as productive as the physical ones. And we changed the way also to speak with friends and families by using, WhatsApp video, FaceTime calls. At 7 p.m. on Friday, I had my virtual aperitivo with my friends. And we have seen also gaming platforms such as Fortnite capable to attract millions of fans for an online live concert. And this is a complete disruption that is moving people from a physical place of aggregation into a virtual one. Just a few hours ago, Twitter announced the Work from Home Forever initiative. And major other corporations such as Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and others, they announced that they are extending their work from home policies. It is very clear that the office in the post-pandemic world will be much more virtual than before. And then people will realize that they don't need to go to the office to make the work done. The impact will be very much like the one of the e-commerce. People don't go to shopping malls to buy things anymore. Instead, they go for social interaction and social experience. So the purpose of office space will be to bring people together emotionally. So the office of tomorrow might look more like a cooking place, a kitchen, or maybe a pub where people are going together or having a beer. And the building owners have to rethink their office design by adopting a more human-centric strategy that integrates digital services and office facilities. And building automation will increase more and more and will become touchless. People will be reluctant to touch objects like switches, elevator buttons, and thermostats. Building designers should already consider also touchless automation, like, for example, hands-free doors, voice-activated elevators, and phone-controlled door locks. And as the coronavirus crisis changes the way we work, the role of technology in the workplace will accelerate. So technology will help us having a more comfortable work environment, will surely help us to be more productive and boost our creativity and stay in a safer and more secure place. Thank you. To you, Byron.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio. Before I introduce our last speaker, Kevin, I just remind everybody, if you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A panel. Hopefully we'll have just a few minutes at the end where we can get to a couple of them. I'll introduce Kevin Bromber now, who's the CEO of myDevices. myDevices is a software application platform provider, runs a marketplace. They have prepackaged end-to-end solutions. Got a lot of interesting things and have had a lot of experience. So Kevin, take it away.
Thank you, Byron. So myDevices some of you know us as having plug-and-play solutions for people counting, for occupancy. And as Antonio showed, that we were part of the nurse call system that was deployed in those 8 hospitals in Barcelona. Many of our solutions today are deployed through our partners like Sodexo and Engie, into Marriott's and Hilton's and Chevrons. And we're doing things like people counting and occupancy at desk and rooms and elevators and conference rooms. And a lot of that was covered by some of my colleagues here on the call today. But I'm always fascinated by the use cases that maybe aren't so obvious. And the reason that I'm looking at some of the not so obvious use cases right now is I feel that a lot of the hotels and the hospitality industry and healthcare industry, they're in flux right now. And yes, there's a lot of talk about some of those solutions, but it's also hard for them to make a move on actually implementing and buying and deploying, because they're still waiting for laws to take shape. But we've discovered some other issues, which is a very stressed infrastructure. So as human beings have moved from their offices into their homes and their behaviors are changing, it's actually stressing the infrastructure. So for example, what I would ask all of you to do on the call is go into Google right now and just type in the word flushable wipes, okay? And then go to news, and you will see no less than 10 stories from Detroit to Pennsylvania to all over the world. You will see how flushable wipes are causing havoc on the sewage systems around the world. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, they're not really flushable. That's one of the problems. In fact, you'll see a lawsuit that's taking place right now where some of the cities are suing the manufacturers because they truly aren't flushable. But what it's doing is it gets into the sewage system and into the pumps, and those pumps start to choke. And if they choke, what happens is sewage backs up into the streets or into people's homes, causing a major health hazard. So the flushable wipe and the sewage is a direct impact of COVID, and it's something that we can solve for. Next slide, please. So not just the water pumps and water treatment plants, but there's stress across the entire industry with conveyor belts and the supply chain being stressed, things like air compressors and air conditioners working harder. And in the old world, these types of machines were serviced based on a schedule. So simply just send out the facilities guy every week, every month, whatever the schedule is, to service these machines, to check their health, and and if they broke, they literally would run over and they would fix that. But where the world really needs to get to is more of a preventative maintenance. So if we can move to the next slide. And one of the solutions that we provide, again, there's a whole bunch of prepackaged solutions we have. One of them is a predictive maintenance solution. And this wireless LoRaWAN sensor, that is actually a sewage water treatment plant motor right there. You literally take that sensor and you just slap it onto the machine, and it learns when that machine is healthy, but also determines when it's starting to feel sick, and it alerts the facilities managers to go out and service that machine before a problem actually occurs. So that's pretty much it. I see that we're at 7:50, so I want to make sure not go over and leave time for Q&A. But we think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity with the preventative maintenance, not just in sewage plants, but anywhere where there's large motors and there's scheduled maintenance converting to preventative. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to everybody. I thought it was really interesting. It appears that the listeners also did too. I see pretty much everybody stuck around for the whole thing. So we've got just a few minutes here, and I'll try and maybe answer or ask a couple of questions to the panelists. I see some of them are getting responded to online, but in case people aren't actually looking at that, there was a question about specifically about the U.S. pushing much of the COVID-19 response to the states, and whether or not there was an opinion that there would actually become laws of enforcing social distancing and density of employees in the space, those kind of things. The question was specifically about the U.S., but I'll broaden it to include Europe since we have a number of people in Europe as well on the panel. So does anybody want to share some comments on that? I see Mike, Antonio, and Hans have all responded, but maybe we'll just start with Hans, talk about Europe, and then Antonio, and then we'll go to Mike for the U.S.
What you see in Europe is that there are some regulations from the government. Health and safety is key, and you're not allowed to open your office in the old situation. You really have to make sure that people keep distance and that you disinfect a lot, desks, chairs, everything that can be touched by people. No, so that in Europe it will be mandatory. I don't know about the US.
Well, I could jump in there, and as I said in my presentation, it goes beyond regulatory risk to legal issues and liability in the U.S. If there are 50 states here, obviously you've got 28 different jurisdictions potentially in the EU, but in the 50 states there will probably be 35 different answers to some of these questions. States that took a beating during the lockdown and during the pandemic are likely to see regulatory efforts to force certain protocols. But I think the big question right now, if you want to back up and think about what's a defensible position for a building owner or a factory manager, ultimately you need to be able to stand in front of the door the day that everybody comes back, look them in the eye, and honestly say, we have done everything possible to make this the safest building we can make it. We've leveraged technology, we've thought through protocols, we've created a contact tracing team. All of those things are not just important for obvious ethical reasons, but they're going to become legally either required or you will ignore them at your own risk.
Okay, thanks. So I'm gonna ask one more question here that came in, and then we'll wrap it up since we're about out of time. There was a question about how LoRa and LoRaWAN can be combined with other technologies, like specifically mentioned BLE and Wi-Fi, which people are very familiar with. I know Nesten uses also ultra-wideband. So I know a number of the solutions that many of you have implemented do combine several technologies together, and probably a chance and opportunity here to sort of go back and highlight those. So we'll just kind of work our way through. Kevin, if you want to comment anything on that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so prior to the lockdown in Q1 of this year and a little bit of Q4, we had deployed in over 10,000 hotel rooms a panic button solution. I shouldn't say we, our partners, Sprint and some of our white label partners sold to hotels these panic button solutions that were provided to staff members because there are, or I should say were, mandates that enabled those staff to, if they ever felt threatened, like a housekeeper who's cleaning a room, and if they feel like a guest is going to threaten them, they want to be able to push a button, and they want to be identified at the floor and room level so that the local security can come and help them. And then as they flee or as they're moving around after they push the button, then they're being tracked at the floor and room level every 10 seconds. And the best way that we saw to achieve that was with LoRaWAN buttons that they would hang on a keychain or on a lanyard around their neck. And then each of the rooms has BLE beacons that the LoRaWAN talks to and listens to, and in hallways and stairwells and basements. And that's the other thing, we call it the no dead zone technology, because there are other emergency buttons that are out there that are purely cellular, but those simply don't work in elevators and places that cell coverage doesn't work. So there's a great advantage with LoRaWAN combined with the BLE getting down to the room and floor level accuracy. And then of course it backhauls to a cellular gateway that then comes out, which cellular was great because you're not onto the Wi-Fi of those facilities. So very important for ease of implementation, but also keeping that system off of the other system within the organization. So that's one of the things that we've deployed and found some good success with it.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to go in reverse order here. Antonio, any comment you want to make on this one?
No, as Kevin said, there is a combination of technologies that allows the social distancing prevention use case, let's call it use case. So using Bluetooth or other sub-gigahertz or above gigahertz technology to trace the distance between people, and LoRaWAN to send the message to the cloud. So these kind of initiatives and projects we have in many different countries right now. And we see that this kind of prevention is going to be very well accepted. As I wrote in one of the answers of the Q&A, in Italy, there are even more strict regulations about it. So you not only have to keep distance between people, the 6 feet distance, but you have also to wear masks, to sanitize your hands, and to make disinfection in the offices. So there are a series of different initiatives and precautions that you have to adopt in order to go back to work.
Okay. Thanks. Hans, any comment you want to make about combining LoRa with other technologies?
Yeah, we use Wi-Fi trackers that operate directly on the Wi-Fi infrastructure in a building, and we use that for the large numbers on the floor or in a building, because our sensor technology is pretty specific. It's small areas and desks and meeting rooms and stuff like that. But sometimes you're also interested in how many people are on this floor, and that's where we use that.
Okay. And last couple ones here, Andrew, any comment you want to make about? I know this is sort of right in your wheelhouse.
So we sort of took a look at top-down approach, and the system had a vision of what kind of system we want to build, and then we drill down to technologies, and each one of the areas we basically selected the best technology for particular purpose, and the LoRaWAN was a perfect candidate for putting the whole system together with the other sensing technology and BLE. That's how we architected our system.
Okay. And Mike, I'll let you get the last word here. Unless you're on mute.
Hey, I'm having a little audio problem here. Sorry. Why don't we pass on that one?
Okay, no problem. Okay. So thank you, everybody. We'll wrap it up here. Really appreciate all your comments, questions, and listening. If you have any questions that weren't able to be addressed here today, you can see how to contact the LoRa Alliance. You just contact the Alliance if you don't have the contact information for the individual person, and we'll make sure it gets to the right person. So thank you again, and have a good rest of the day.